Michael Jordan just said something that nobody in NASCAR expected to hear out loud. In a CBS interview that took 10 years to get, he looked straight into the camera and admitted his lawsuit against NASCAR was 100% personal. He was ready to lose everything, get kicked out of the sport, and blow the whole thing up. And the crazy part? He says he'd do it all again. Now, before we get into what he actually said, you need to understand what was really at stake here, because this wasn't just some rich guy throwing money at lawyers. This was a calculated attack on one of the most powerful sports organizations in America. And Jordan knew exactly what he was doing. Let's go back to October 2024. Jordan's team, 2311 Racing, along with another team called Front Row Motorsports, filed a lawsuit against NASCAR. The charge? Anti-competitive and monopolistic behavior. In plain English, they said NASCAR had rigged the game. NASCAR controlled the racetracks. They controlled the cars through something called next-gen technology, which they owned through patents. They controlled the contracts. And if you didn't like it, tough. There was nowhere else for these teams to go. 13 teams looked at that situation and signed the charter agreement anyway. 2 teams didn't, and those 2 teams decided to go to war instead. Here's what made this lawsuit different from anything NASCAR had ever seen before. The lawyer Jordan hired was Jeffrey Kessler. If that name sounds familiar, it should. This is the same lawyer who helped bring free agency to the NFL. The same lawyer who fought the NCAA and won. Jordan didn't just show up to make noise. He showed up with someone who had already beaten bigger organizations than NASCAR. And stay with me here, because what Jordan said in that CBS interview changes everything about how you see this story. Remember, Jordan said this lawsuit was 100% personal. So what exactly made the most competitive man in sports history take it that personally? Here's what he told CBS anchor Gayle King. When he first got into NASCAR as a team owner, he didn't fully understand the business. He was learning. But the more he learned, the angrier he got. Because what he found was a system where the people at the very top were doing great financially. And the people actually putting on the show, the drivers, the teams, the crew members who made NASCAR worth watching, were not being fairly paid or properly recognized. Now think about that for a second. Jordan spent his entire career fighting for respect and fair treatment. He watched his Chicago Bulls teammates fight for contracts. He lived through a league that didn't always treat its players right. And when he walked into NASCAR and saw the same pattern, something clicked. This wasn't just about money. This was about something Jordan understood in his gut. He said it straight. This sport was not set up for success long-term for the individuals involved in the sport. And once he saw that, there was no going back. But here's the part nobody was expecting. Jordan admitted that when he filed that lawsuit, he wasn't sure he was going to win. In fact, he said something that stopped people in their tracks. He told CBS that he was willing to lose the lawsuit. He was willing to get kicked out of NASCAR entirely. He said, and this is almost a direct quote, that even if they kicked him out of the sport, even if he lost in court, his goal was to wake up some people, to make NASCAR leadership look at what they were doing and understand that it was wrong. That is not normal behavior. Most business owners, when they file a lawsuit, are trying to protect their investment. Jordan was willing to blow up his entire investment just to make a point. He had 6 cars and a growing team. He put all of it at risk, on purpose. And then he admitted something even more surprising. He was nervous. Michael Jordan, the man who never blinked in a Game 7, the man who made "I took that personally" into a cultural moment, admitted he was nervous about taking the witness stand. But the second he decided to go through with it, all of that nervousness disappeared. He said it himself. "I was all in. I was aggressively going to win. I became a competitor all over again." So he was all in. He had the best antitrust lawyer in the country. He was willing to lose everything. And then what happened? In December 2024, before the case ever went to a full trial verdict, NASCAR and the teams reached a settlement. The financial terms were never made public, but the real prize wasn't money. The real prize was something that changed the entire structure of NASCAR. Before the settlement, teams operated on what's called time-limited charters. That meant NASCAR could essentially kick any team out when the charter expired. Teams couldn't plan long-term. Sponsors didn't want to commit big money to a team that might not exist in 3 years. Drivers didn't want to sign long contracts without security. It was a power move that kept every team owner nervous and obedient. After the settlement, all teams moved to permanent charters. One Yale economics professor who actually testified in the case estimated that the value of switching from temporary to permanent charters was roughly $60 million per car. Jordan's team alone had 4 cars at the time. You do that math. But Jordan wasn't just fighting for himself. The permanent charters applied to every team in NASCAR. 13 teams that had signed the original agreement and stayed quiet while Jordan went to court, they benefited too. Now here's where the story gets even more interesting, because while Jordan was in the middle of a legal war with NASCAR, something was happening on the actual racetrack that nobody saw coming. The 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season started, and 23XI Racing did not just compete, they took over. Driver Tyler Reddick won 4 of the first 6 races of the 2026 season. But it wasn't just the number that shocked people, it was how he won. Reddick won the Daytona 500, and then he won 3 races in a row right after that. 3 consecutive wins to start a Cup Series season. That had never happened before in the entire history of NASCAR. Not once, not ever. Meanwhile, Jordan's other driver, Bubba Wallace, was sitting 3rd in the overall point standings. The team that NASCAR tried to control, the team that filed the lawsuit, the team that 2 years ago was fighting for its survival, was now the best team in the sport. Jordan sat on the pit wall at Darlington Raceway in March 2026 and watched his cars dominate. The same man who had been in a courthouse fighting for the right to exist in this sport was now watching his drivers make history. So let's bring this all the way back to that CBS interview, the one that took 10 years to get. The one where Jordan said the lawsuit was 100% personal, because now you understand why. Jordan grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte is basically the center of the NASCAR universe. He wasn't some outsider who bought a team and started complaining. He had been watching this sport his whole life. He knew the culture. He knew what it meant to the people involved. And that made it hurt more when he got inside and saw how the business actually worked. He told Gayle directly, "I've been a fan. It's not like I just woke up and said, I'm going to go and attack NASCAR." He cared about the sport. That's why he fought it. And here's the thing about Jordan that separates him from every other sports legend who tried to become a team owner. Most of them want to be liked. They want a nice ownership box and good press and a trophy photo. Jordan wanted to actually change something. He was willing to be hated. He was willing to be the villain. He was willing to lose. Because for Jordan, losing while standing for something real has always been better than winning while staying quiet about something wrong. He said he wouldn't have filed the lawsuit if he didn't have a good case, and he was right. He had a great case. He had the right lawyer, the right argument, and enough resources to see it through. But more than any of that, he had something that most people walking into a legal battle don't have. He had already decided he didn't care about the outcome, and that made him unstoppable. So was this really a bombshell confession? Yes, but not for the reason the headline suggests. The bombshell isn't that the lawsuit was personal. Anyone who paid attention knew that. The real bombshell is that Michael Jordan, one of the wealthiest and most recognizable athletes in human history, looked at NASCAR and said the quiet part out loud. He said the people putting on the show were not being treated right. He said it publicly, legally, and under oath. And then he went out and won anyway. That's not a confession, that's a statement. And NASCAR is going to be living with that statement for a very long time.